All right, let's go ahead and kick off our Women in Tech series. Today I am with Rashida Hodge. If you would, Rashida, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role with Microsoft.
Okay, wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for, having me on this podcast. I'm a big fan and just passionate of, bringing others along, especially women in tech. So I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be able to share some of my nuggets. A little bit about me. I always like to tell people, first and foremost, I am Caribbean born, West Indian born, product of the U.S. Virgin Islands, grew up in St. Thomas, 32 square miles. Most maps don't show it. But what an enriching experience, that I was able to have growing up on such a small island, growing up really in a village, across the board. And I've been in the technology industry for, 20 years. I went to North Carolina State University, got my bachelor's and master's in industrial engineering. And then I also got my MBA from Duke University. So I like to say I'm West Indian born, but I'm Carolina educated. Did all my schooling in North Carolina and still call North Carolina home outside of the Virgin Islands. And prior to coming to Microsoft, I spent about 19 years at IBM, where I did a variety of different roles across the board, from development to product management to customer success to go to market. And so really built a T-shaped career across multiple technologies and also multiple functional areas. And in February of this year, I had the great opportunity to join Microsoft and become part of the Microsoft tribe. And in this role at Microsoft, I am the VP of Data and AI for the Customer Success Organization. And think about it as, our team, we really help customers realize the value of our data and AI services that sit on top of the Azure cloud. And so I lead a team of, technical architects that have the breadth and depth of our portfolio, from, data modernization to analytics to data warehousing to AI and ML. And we work really much in conjunction with our sales team, and also with our clients, most importantly, to be able to bring that value to life.
Wow, can I be you when I grow up? Like I'm taken back. First off, go Wolfpack. I don't know if you know, PS Solutions is located where our headquarters are up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, but we have a development center down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and my younger sister actually goes to NC State, so I'm a big Wolfpack girl myself. So that's awesome. So what made you first interested in technology? Was it when you were a child? Was it once you started taking some classes, you said, oh, technology is it? Did you see a future? Can you give us a little bit background on like how you kind of got started in this field?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, right? And I always tell people that you are a product of your imagination. You're not a product of your environment. And the reason I say that is because growing up in the Virgin Islands, I didn't know engineers. It wasn't a profession that everyone did. And, growing up, people either work for the government or, we are a big tourism industry, or, you worked in the tourism industry. And so I actually got wind of this thing called engineering as a child. I probably was around 8 or 9 years old. I read a book, and I can never remember the name of the book I read, but I read this book, and in the book, it talked about an engineer solving problems. And I went to my mother and I said, I want to be an engineer. And my mom said to me, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. But in this book, they talked about how this engineer solved problems. And it was so cool. And, I'm aging myself here, but my mom said, okay, let's go to the library and let's go figure it out, because there was no let's Google it in those days. And we walked down to the library and we started like researching engineering. And that's really where, I got that inspiration, and the curiosity from my parents, just kind of drove me to understand what engineering disciplines there were out there, and really how to approach this as a profession. So I always tell people that if I just had to look around me, I wouldn't have been an engineer because I didn't know any. But, through this book, I was able to imagine that I could be an engineer. And then that was brought to life by the village around me.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think that's super special, and kind of going into why we're doing these interviews. We're sharing them with young girls in middle school and high school, and to show them like you can become a leader, you can enter this field in the tech industry. We need more of us in the tech industry. So I think that's awesome that you didn't necessarily have that role model, but you found a source and you said, I want to be like that. Quick question: Did you enjoy puzzles in your younger days? Like before you knew that you wanted to be an engineer, puzzles and just problem solving. Did you catch yourself, always trying to find solutions to stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I was always a curious child.
Hmm.
Especially living on an island. Like I always felt growing up that there was always more to something. There was always more to like. There had to be more out there, right, beyond what just I could see. So I sort of grew up with this notion of just being curious about everything. Wanting to put my hands into everything. How does things work? Like being able to try. I have that personality where it's like I tell people I'll try something at least once, right? And that just kind of goes back to the curiosity nature. But I want to test this out. I want to see if I like it. I want to see how things work. So I don't remember like being a puzzle person growing up in the islands. We were always outside. So as a kid, I was always on bikes. I was with my dad. As he was fixing cars. So I was super hands on. But I always was this very inquisitive person around really having a perspective and understanding how things actually worked, right? And this view of, man, the world is big, right? And so how do I capture that? How do I be a part of something larger, something more moving forward?
Right, and technology is perfect. I mean, the change, everyday change, AI is a whole nother thing to tackle, and I just find it so fascinating, and like what the future of that looks like. So it's awesome that you are right there in the forefront of being able to work with that. I think that's awesome. Do you remember any classes or workshops, whether that be in NC State or in the community, different organizations? Do you remember any of the workshops that you took to help you get to this place, or any like helped you with background or anything like that?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think, in high school, I had a a teacher. His name was Mr. Walters. He was my chemistry teacher and my physics teacher. But I just felt there was something about him in terms of how he taught our class and how he taught us in terms of thinking through something, not just here's the answer, but how do you think through it? And so that problem solving mechanism for me, I really love. And then he actually helped water and nurture me being an engineer. He actually went to MIT, and I remember him coming to me and saying, Rashida, when I told him, I said, Mr. Walters, I want to be an engineer. And he was like, okay. He was like, then you should go to MIT and you should be a computer engineer. And I was like, okay. He was like, computer is hot. That's what you should do. And I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I want to be a computer engineer. And she was like, why? Who told you that? And I said, Mr. Walters. He said, I should go to MIT and be a computer engineer. It's like, she laughed and she was like, that's not how it works. She was like, let's go figure out like what engineering is out there, what are you really passionate about, what you can do with this after you get a degree. And that was important because my mom has a degree now, but like at that age, my mom was still working and she was getting her education. And my mom she was going locally to the University of the Virgin Islands. She didn't go away to college. So I was kind of going to be that first person of my family to go away and to go to college. And so she was like, you have to be thoughtful about this. So where did we go? We went back to the library, right? And we started researching like what programs and stuff that were out there. And we found this program called Worldwide Youth in Science and Engineering, which was at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And this was a summer program where you could, they would essentially like talk to you about the different engineering disciplines. Here's a chemical engineer. You got to sit into summer classes so you could get a vibe for, okay, what is it being in a classroom and being taught by a professor? And then they would have these forums in the evening, these networking events where people that were already in the profession would come and say, here's what it's like to be an industrial engineer. Here's what it's like to be a chemical engineer, et cetera. And that's how I actually found industrial engineering, going to that program. And I was like, industrial engineering, like, this is so cool. Like, I get to learn about all of the different engineering disciplines, but most importantly, I get to look at how to systematically solve a problem, taking all of that into consideration. Like, what's the process of problem solving? And I was like, that's what I want to do. And so if I didn't go to that program at University of Illinois, I would have never found industrial engineering, and I would have probably picked some random engineering discipline. But I picked industrial engineering, and then I came home and I said, my mom said, okay, now let's look for the schools that are good in industrial engineering. And then I started making my search right? In that way, looking at what are some of the top schools that really specialize in industrial engineering, what are some of the other things that those schools have. And that was really defining for me, like, because, I tell people that, one, I didn't grow up around engineers. I think I met one engineer in high school when I was doing like a after school program at our local hospital, but he was an electrical engineer. And so he was like, you should do electrical engineering. Miss Alto was like, computer engineering. But they all had their view, from their perspective. So this program really opened up my eyes to, here's all of the disciplines, and then it allowed me to be able to have passion for, my thought process, how I wanted to engage, and which landed me on industrial engineering. So for me, that was the most defining thing, and I talk about it all the time. And it was just a great experience. I'd never been to Illinois before. I remember my dad telling my mom, you're just going to send Rashida to some random place? You don't even know. Like, we don't even know anyone there. My mom was like, yeah, we're going to send her to some random place. And I remember talking to like the leader of the program, because I didn't have any family there. And, I was like, is it possible? Like, what do I need to do? I'm coming alone. My parents are sending me. And they literally helped me like figure out my accommodations for like the weekend,
Wow.
because I was flying in from so far. And so just the program, they were just so gracious to really give me an opportunity to, really make sure that this program, really allowed me to not only understand engineering, but the college experience, because I didn't have that experience of going college hunting and visiting schools, on campus. So even at NC State, I went sight unseen, right? I was like, okay, I'm going there. And I showed up with my bags, right? When it was time to go to school. And so for me, like, that is the most defining program and experience that really helped solidify, my journey of engineering.
Wow. You can really tell that you are such a go-getter and you're so brave, and you can tell that you're very confident, and you see something that you want and you want to get it, so I really am impressed. That's awesome, and thank goodness that NC State is such a beautiful campus, at least so that's awesome. And I mean, considering you're the first out of your family, that's a big step, So tell me how you felt during that, transition of, moving from the Virgin Islands to NC State, Raleigh.
Yeah, a lot of places. I tell people, like, I think when I landed in Raleigh, my mom said to me on the plane, like, are you sure, like, this is what you want to do, where you want to go? I was like, well, we're already here. Like, what can we do now? And it's interesting you say, like you're so brave, you're so courageous. I always like to tell, students and my mentees that everyone sees the destination, but they don't see the journey, right? And as I was going through that, like, and even now in my career, there's bumps and bruises along the way that people don't see. But in that bravery, I was scared. Like, I had knots in my belly, right? Like, I wasn't perfect. I was like, yeah, I'm going to Illinois, right? I mean, I was, afraid, but I didn't let fear take me over. I let it continue to just push me. And I always tell people that in life, you don't do anything alone. Like, anyone who is successful, others brought you along the way. And I couldn't be more grateful for, that professor at University of Illinois that, helped guide me along the way. Or when I called NC State and I spoke to this guy by the name of Clarence Smith, and I called him, naive girl from the Virgin Islands. I called him up and I said, hi, I got accepted to NC State, and I won't mention the other school, but I'm trying to decide between NC State and X school. Where do you think I should go? And he was like, didn't you tell me you're from the Virgin Islands? He was like, well, I think the weather is way better in North Carolina.
I love
Like,
that.
you should come here. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. As a 17-year-old, I mean, that's how you're making your decision to go to college, on the weather. But I mean, just the warmth, right, of him. And we talked about other things, right? But
Right.
I always remember that moment. Like, whenever I see Clarence, we always joke. He's like, do you remember that time when you called me from the Virgin Islands? And so I think, a lot of times we just forget that these moments and these people are so instrumental in guiding us and, giving us that perspective in terms of how we should look at things, and how we should assess things, across the board. And when I came to North Carolina, it was a new experience. Like I remember when I walked into my dorm in Owen Hall, my mom and my dad and I, we walked and we didn't even know what to buy, right? Because we had never been to an orientation. We didn't have this experience. So we walked around and looked at other people's rooms to see what they were buying.
Mm.
Right. And so, okay, well, what do we need? Like, because we didn't know. So we kind of said, let's go to the dorm and let's kind of like figure things out.
Right,
And
right.
literally like that's what we did, and then we went to the store that afternoon and then we started shopping, right, and that kind of stuff like that. And one of my uncles, he had a friend that lived in North Carolina, and so she let us stay at her house and let my mom and my dad stay there, which was super gracious for us, again, right, helping the village, right? So the village, it helps you, along. That certainly reduced the expenses for my parents on, helping me to transport. But a lot of it was just kind of not being afraid to ask questions. And I remember when I moved into my, as we were kind of scooping around, my mom and I, we heard this girl talking and she sounded like she had an accent. And I said, man, she sounds like she's from the islands. And my mom was like, well, let's go introduce ourselves. And we went to introduce ourselves, and then like we started screaming because she was from the Virgin Islands. She wasn't from
Wow.
St. Thomas, but she was from St. Croix. And what a coincidence, right? She was my neighbor right next door to me. Literally, we both came from the Virgin Islands. Like, what a coincidence that we are neighbors. And that was great because it provided me with a sense of comfort, right? Like, there is someone else there that kind of has been, know where I come from, and we're still friends today. She was an
Awesome.
engineer. She's a chemical engineer. She's now an entrepreneur living in Charlotte. But that having someone that kind of knew your journey and can sort of empathize with you was a real blessing. But one of the things, because I do a lot of give back at North Carolina State, and one of the reasons why I do is because I just felt like when I attended North Carolina State, it just felt like home right away. Like I didn't, it just did. I just felt warm. And the campus felt warm. The professors wanted me to succeed, across the board. And I remember there was a class, it was IE 210. It was this graphics course where you had to like use AutoCAD and you had to like look at objects and say, what does the top look like? What does the side look like? And I sucked at that. And it was the first industrial engineering course. And I remember going to Clarence Smith and I said, I can't be an engineer. Like this class, I can't see. I can't, my brain just doesn't see that way. And he was like, get out of my office, Rashida. He was just like, you're going to be an engineer. And until you convince yourself that you are going to be an engineer, regardless of the outcome of this class, you're not coming back in my office with the story, right? And so, I didn't do well in that class, by the way. I survived, but I didn't do well. But he gave me the motivation to say, like, it's not about one thing. It's not about one event. It's not about one class, but it's about overcoming it all and believing yourself and giving yourself the passion. And I just feel like, NC State's motto is think and do. And they really taught me how to just think and do, to just jump into it. And I tell people all the time, it was really the best decision, that I made. It's not always about where a school is on the ranking list, right? It's about the other things that you bring together. And I really feel that NC State really did that for me.
Awesome. Well, I love that you had that experience, and the fact that that helped you, to get to this place that you're at now is awesome. And I think an important key too is that support system. Your neighbor being so close to home, you have that support system. As a woman, I've learned in the tech industry to have that support system, inside, outside of your career is really important. So I love that you felt that within your college. So looking where you're at now and looking in your past, what is something that you wish you knew or that you would tell yourself, a younger you?
Uh, a lot of things,
A lot.
but um, take it slow. Like, you don't have to do it all at once. Look, I think that, I don't live in regrets, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So I really have appreciated, the journey that I've taken. I think what I would tell my younger self is not to put so much pressure on myself. I think especially as a Black woman, as a woman in tech, as a younger woman in tech, I've always felt this trifecta of I have to do more. I have to put in the extra time. Coming from a smaller island, coming from teenage parents, right? My mom was a teenager when she gave birth to me. We did not have a lot. And so I always wanted to make sure that I proved to my mom that everything she gave up so that I could have was worth it. I wanted my family, in some cases, who didn't believe in me and felt that my mom made the worst mistake on earth, that her desire to keep me and to love me was the right thing, and that I will succeed. So for a long time, there was just all this pressure that I'd built up around just overperforming and over succeeding and proving to everyone else. And, probably maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, that's when I kind of came into myself, right? And I said, I don't have to prove anything to anybody. Right. Because I also realized how much of a tax it was. It was so exhausting. I wasn't actually enjoying my success. I was enjoying the accomplishments because it was always finish this and what's the next one, right? And I had to come to a point where I say, gosh, like taking a step back, like if people can't appreciate the journey that I've been on, then oh well, their loss, not mine. And that really just changed my perspective on how I went about things. So I think a lot of times as women, we're put under so much pressure to overdo everything that we don't even enjoy and have empathy for our own ability to overcome and have joy in that. And I think if I can go back, like that's what I would do much differently. And I wish I learned that lesson much earlier.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I definitely, I agree. Just starting out in my career, I'm about a year in, and what's next? What's next? And it's like, no, slow down, enjoy what you have, because every day you're learning something new. So take that in. So I love that you think that, and that's what you would tell yourself. So I only have a couple more questions for you. I know we're getting close on time. You're a busy woman. Got to get back to it. What is one piece of advice you would give to a young girl, whether that be in elementary school, middle school, or even high school? I know in elementary school it's like, oh, there's not many girls in the tech, or that's what boys do, ew, gross, whatever. Or middle school, high school is like, oh, I'll do it if you do it. Us women are always together and always having to make our next move based on other people. So, yeah. So what is one piece of advice you would give to a young girl interested?
I think, what I tell girls to live a life of exploration. Like, I think one of the things that has been so defining for me is just I've led this life of curiosity and exploration. I mean, I could not have planned out the journey that I've had, but what I did do is I just tried stuff. Like, I did the jobs people didn't want to do, right? I did the things people feared. When I lived in China, I remember when my manager came to talk about this opportunity, many people didn't raise their hands. And so, I lived in Eastern Europe for 4 years. I didn't even know where Slovakia was on the map when I went to live there. And so I think I would just say live a life of exploration. Don't be afraid to try things one time, see if you like it. But I think at that age, it's all about just exploring, learning what's out there, learning what you're good at, learning what you love, getting a feel for what you're passionate about. And I think you can't really do that unless you try.
Awesome. And that kind of feeds into my last question, is how do you think that we can make it more attractive, like the tech industry more attractive, as a career opportunity for young girls? And like you said, to explore, whether that be in schools, do schools need to help us women, in these roles, expand and spread the awareness of these roles? And how do you think that we can make it more glamorous, or I'm loss of words, but you know what I mean. Like, how do you think that we could get more girls interested? Is what I'm trying to get at.
Look, I think we have to, come to a point where we don't talk about things in such a binary fashion. Like, this is for girls and this is for boys. Like, are you passionate about it or not? Right? Especially from a career standpoint, right? I think that there is so much traditional, gender perspectives in terms of how we look at roles and careers. And I think we just need to throw that up in the air, right? And say, it's something you're interested in. It's something you're passionate in, or not. I think that's number one. And I think number two, like, we should allow people to just try things, right? I think that, I think as children, as kids, and growing up and early in your career, you don't have a lot to worry about, right? Mm-hmm. And so the older you get, the more responsibility, right, comes with age. And so I think, we should really just in terms of schools providing more access, letting people hear different people's stories, because we all have a journey, we all have a perspective, and that's different. You may talk to another industrial engineer that had a totally different journey, than I did. And that's important, right? So people can see themselves in individuals. And our kids moving forward need to be able to see that these goals are attainable, right? And that it's not just the unicorn. I think sometimes, we lift up the unicorns and we lift up the folks that went to X and Y, Z schools. We need to let folks know that these things are all attainable. We can all achieve them if we try, and we're going to fall once or twice, but we're going to get on back up and we're going to try again, right? Because, with success comes, iteration. Like, we're gonna stump our toe, we're gonna hit our knee, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. So I just think, I think sometimes we make it so complicated in terms of how do we get more women in tech, right? It's like, how do we diversify and make it inclusive, period, right? And not think about life in such binary fashions.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. Like I said in the beginning of this interview, I want to be with when I grow up, and I definitely even more. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. I'm very excited to share this with some of our high schoolers here in Wilmington, and then also up in Altoona and throughout the globe. With the amazing thing that we have an internet now, we can share it out there. So thank you so much, and I look forward to watching your career and watching you and really just looking up to you. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and it's a privilege. And I tell folks all the time, I'm amazed that so many people look up to me because, for such a long time, I didn't look up to myself, right? I didn't even know what I could be, what I could do growing up. And so I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And people like you empower me to continue going and just fuel my energy. So thank you so much for reaching out to me, and go Pack.
Yeah, go Pack. Thank you.